Hi, folks. Welcome to Friday's edition of the I Write Radio podcast. Well, I was about to say we're not going to call it Hat Friday anymore.
Oh, bugger. See, I've just put it on.
We'll call it Half Hat Friday.
All right.
Seeing as Stuart remembered and I forgot.
I didn't, but it was lying there.
Well, we're gonna go, I suppose, mostly with the papers today. Jean Freeman took the COVID briefing for Nicola Sturgeon today. We'll have a quick chat about that, but there's an article from Iain
Lawson.
Peter A. Bell has done a bit, and Joanna Cherry has a piece in the National. We're going to have a look at all of them. And I suppose we kind of have to have a quick mention of Brexit, but simply because we're on the 29th cliff edge. So we don't actually have a cliff edge, do we? We don't have a cutoff.
I have a good quote. It's a shame we haven't got it. Guy de Verstof, the Dutch, Belgian, the Flemish MEP, who really winds up all the Brexiteers. He's a very pro-European and very articulate with his English. What was it he said? He said, they're politicians. They won't decide until the last deadline.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, our deadline now is the 31st because they haven't laid a deadline down between the last deadline and that deadline.
But they've also said they might extend at the last minute. Well,
Mr. Barnier apparently said it's a matter of hours because they need to get it ratified by the European Parliament, don't they?
Yeah.
So they're not quite as flexible as Boris, who can say yay or nay on our behalf without.
They are not going to get it. They're not going to get what they want. You cannot leave the club and expect all the privileges.
Oh, well, you're definitely, I mean, we're going to get shafted whichever way, but
Whichever way.
I hear that the level playing field has been, the whisper I'm getting from my man in Europe is that all that's left is fishing.
Do you know what I nearly put together earlier on was because I actually did the screen grabs and I was thinking of putting a screen behind me. There were headlines out of the National, but basically they were, 20-mile queues of lorries and headlines like that. And there were about 6 headlines from articles in the National newspaper. And you add them all up and you look at it and you think, God, we're facing a disaster.
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be more difficult. The best we can say is it's going to be much more difficult than it was a month ago. The worst we can say is it's going to be a complete and utter total disaster. Somewhere between those 2 points. But the fishing thing's interesting because my friend in Europe reckons that Ireland are going to give France a chunk of their quota to get this over the line. That's the rumor he's hearing. So it'll be interesting to see if that comes to pass. He's not very confident about it, but one of the Irish diplomats apparently let it slip. So.
And one of the Belgian diplomats, I think it was their Chancellor of the Exchequer or something, let slip the different prices they have to pay for the different vaccines, COVID vaccines.
Well, is that not my public record?
Apparently not until this was leaked.
Oh. No, I thought because we basically had paid blah, blah million, all you did was then divide it by the amount of number of vaccines. And that
apparently this female, I don't know what she is, the finance secretary of the Belgian government had let it slip. There was a list of about 6 or 7 vaccines that they're expecting to be using in the near future and the different prices. I thought I'd maybe stuck it on Twitter or something.
I see the American agency has okayed a second one.
It's the Moderna one?
Yeah.
That's an expensive one. That's 12 euros a shot, a jag. Whereas I think the One of them's down at less than €1.5 a jag, and another one's $12. And then you've got, if you're using the Pfizer one, must cost an awful lot of money in logistics, you know, the freezers and getting it there and all that.
Although I would imagine in the scheme of things, that's a drop in the ocean.
It would appear that, yes, even if you multiply, let's say you've got 60 million people in the UK, multiply that by 10.
Oh, excuse me.
That gives you 600 million. And that's what it's going to cost to buy all the vaccines for all the people that are going to get it.
Yep.
Not a lot, really, in the scheme of things.
Well, let's move on to Gene Freeman's COVID briefing.
That was a bit neat. We started off with the Brexit and segued neatly into COVID.
So the briefing today, I think, could be summed up by: get your crystal ball out, Gene. All the answers we want that we know you can't give us are about what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, what's going to happen on Tuesday, the last review of the rules and the levels before Christmas and New Year. And can you tell us whether we're going into a national lockdown after Christmas? And they just kept pestering her.
Well, I suppose it's a legitimate question to ask, seeing as
that's their job.
Northern Ireland has said they're going to go into a lockdown on Boxing Day. So I suppose it's legitimate to say, will the Scottish government tell us we're going to go into a lockdown at a given date after Christmas? But you should only have to answer that question once, I think. But that's not good enough. I wonder if these guys do what we do. I mean, do they come in on it at the beginning, or do they just pop in when they're scheduled questions?
Sometimes think that they don't all come in and listen to the whole thing. You get that impression. And then on the other hand, the other question is maybe they compete with each other to get the best answer.
Well, why would they think she would give a different answer? Anyway, that aside. So basically, that was really what it was all about, wasn't it? It was about Tuesday and a lockdown sometime after Christmas rather than in the new year.
I was looking for the sort of side stories, like the Sun guy, Dan Devers. I think they hire these the tabloids hire these journalists, not for their journalist skills, but for their pushy, bolshy skills of annoying people and getting answers. He came up with a complicated question and suggested, but it summed up that wouldn't we have been better to have had a constant, moderate COVID restrictions instead of what was the suggestion? Changing and chopping. Gene Freeman, by the time she got to answering this guy, she virtually said, "Not me, mate."
Well, I mean, yeah, if they got it right and it kept COVID down to a constant level below 5, with the R number below 1, of course we could have had a constant lockdown. But if there's a flare up, you have to lock down harder. So unless he's suggesting what we should have done was gone to level 4 and stayed there for 9 months, I don't see how anybody could have agreed that was a good idea. But it's the Sun after all.
She did say that in her, before she's answered a question, essentially there's no non-essential travel to the rest of the UK. And then at some point she said there should be no travel to England, to the high prevalence places in England. And I was wondering why she didn't mention Wales, because it's worse in England than it is anywhere in Wales.
Wales. I saw a chart the other day and I had to check that it was genuine, because the way the line zoomed up in Wales made me think it might be somebody taking the pee. But they've had a torrid time.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Torrid time, as has Northern Ireland. I think it'll be interesting to see if Scottish government follows what's happening with schools elsewhere, because England's going to stagger pupils returning. Wales, I think nobody's going back. I think they're getting an extra week off. And Northern Ireland, something similar. It's only Scotland that hasn't announced any difference to everybody going back at the start of term.
I don't have an iron in this fire. I don't have any children at school, or even indirectly. I don't know.
I mean, from a political point of view, it'd be interesting to see what they do. Which kind of brings us neatly onto Peter's piece here, because
Peter A. Bell.
Yeah, he's talking about U-turns, and the schools, as in England, the school's decision has been a pretty major U-turn by the English government.
But that Gavin Williamson, goodness me, he's trying to join. Hi there, looks like Jimmy's coming in.
Yeah.
He's trying to join Chris Grayling, failing Grayling. Remember him?
Hello, James.
Afternoon, chaps. How are we?
Not bad.
We're just talking about failing Grayling, and I'm saying that Gavin Williamson is joining him as on the same league table.
Well.
We're actually talking about Peter A. Bell's piece today on U-turns. And I was just saying that the English government has had to do a U-turn on schools in the context of whether the Scottish government, which seems to be the only one that hasn't made changes to school pupils attending school yet. And I'm just wondering if they will feel the need to.
I'm thinking that's a cross that Nicola does not want to be hung on. I think they will do everything in their power not to change schools.
I think you're right. I as I say, all I can say is I see the school kids come and go. Today, the after school club for a Friday was quite small, going past. They come past in a, what do they call these things? A walking bus, you know. All these school kids with shepherded along the pavement.
Right, yeah, okay. They're young kids though, aren't they?
Yeah, right up to any primary age. They move from one school, they move from Victoria School or Trinity School to one across the road from me for the after school club.
All right. So Peter's piece basically was talking about how some U-turns can be made more easily than others. In the context of Nicola U-turning on the section 30. And Stuart and I had a quick chat about this before we went on air. So would you like to lay out your position, Stuart?
I knew you were going to ask me to do that. And all I've got is the last paragraph, because you see, as soon as I started reading Peter's article, Peter, as you know, from where I sit, he blows hot and cold. He could be bipolar as a writer. Some days he's brilliant and other days it's awful. So I started reading today's article and I thought, oh, this is going to be one of those awful ones. Well, it wasn't actually, but it was a case of he could have summed it up in one paragraph. So all I've got in front of me is the final paragraph. What's his argument? Well, a rubber tire burning U-turn. They hate to do it, but why?
Well, his argument is that politicians don't like to U-turn because it makes them look like they were wrong, which is kind of obvious. I mean, if you've got to U-turn from the position you held, you're 180 degrees.
Here's the question though. Is that worse than being caught out lying? Because they seem to be quite happy to lie these days.
Well, is it worse than continuing to be wrong? You know, if the U-turn's the right thing to do, you should U-turn. I actually get quite annoyed sometimes with our press and social media screaming at politicians who've done a U-turn that's brought them to the right place. Why make life hard for them when they've, admitted by the U-turn they've made a mistake and they're now doing the right thing? School meals is an example of that in England. Okay, right, they changed policy. Does it have to be referred to as a U-turn when they eventually got to the right place?
Well, it does by the press, because their job really isn't to report anymore. It's to catch politicians out. And in some strange way, we now live in a society where hacks journalists seem to feel that their job is to take the moral high ground above politicians. No idea how we've got to that, but that's where we seem to be these days.
Well, but Peter's real context of all this was that would Sturgeon be able to U-turn on the Section 30? And I don't think she needs to U-turn on it, because if she wins a landslide at Holyrood next year, ask Boris for a Section 30, he says no, having said in the manifesto that she's going for a referendum. All she has to do is say, well, I've got the mandate. So this is how we're going to do the referendum, whether you give us a Section 30 or not.
Well, the problem with that is, of course, that the unionists won't take part in the referendum under those circumstances.
I don't care. This is the kind of democracy where you're not forced to vote. If the unionists choose not to vote and lose, that's a choice they have freely made.
I think it has to be stronger than that in the manifesto. I have to say that, you know, it really has to. Don't ask me to put the grammar together in the exact words, but it has to be a case of, we said in our manifesto, we have got all the votes necessary to hold this referendum. I dare you to deny us the right, or something, something strong.
All she has to do is omit the word Section 30. That's all she has to do. All she has to do is say there will be a referendum on Scottish independence in 2021, 2022, whatever. But there will be a referendum on Scottish independence if we are in office. And just totally ignore the word Section 30. She doesn't have to complicate it for herself.
I think the point Peter was trying to make was that making this U-turn isn't as tough as it might appear, given that the U-turns that the London government have made on Brexit and COVID.
Yeah, I think the point Peter's really trying to make is that she shouldn't have to make a U-turn. She should never have painted herself into the corner where.
But why are we calling this a U-turn?
Seems to be now.
Well,
I think it's because if she's not, if she is sitting there saying there's going to be a referendum without it being the gold standard, she's the one that coined the phrase gold standard. She's the one that made the Section 30 quite so vital. So it would be a U-turn on her behalf, wouldn't it?
No. I mean, all they've ever said is that's the preferred route. That is the gold standard. That is the preferred route.
She's also been slapped down twice. She's also been slapped down twice, mate. She's had a mandate for this entire parliament, and she's chosen to allow herself to be slapped down by two of the weakest prime ministers, because Boris was, I'm sorry, but Boris was up to his lugs when he said no. And Theresa May's now is not the time. Frankly, the fact that Nicola Sturgeon backed down from now is not the time should embarrass her when she looks back on her career.
And I don't agree with this idea that it's the gold standard, because that's where we're probably going to move on to next.
Well, guys,
Iain Lawson's article disputes that.
Right. Stop making arguments about what we're not talking about. Is this a U-turn?
Exactly. You brought up the term gold standard.
No, I didn't.
No, he didn't. I did.
Oh, sorry.
The point I'm making here is it's not a U-turn. It doesn't have to be a U-turn. She simply, if what goes in the manifesto doesn't mention a Section 30, that's fine.
I think it has to be
get to a referendum. Well, what do you think it should be?
Oh, no, I don't. No. I'm not going to design the words. Not me.
Well, I need it tougher than that. We're holding a referendum and stick it right up yours, Boris Johnson. All she has to say is, if we get the mandate at the Holyrood elections, we will hold a referendum within a year or within the early part of that parliament. And she should be careful about how she puts the date on it. It shouldn't be, we will hold the referendum in December. It should be open-ended.
Yeah, because there's every likelihood that it would require a legal challenge. So,
and I'm pretty sure at that point, if there's a landslide, Westminster will start talking about legislation to stop it.
Mm-hmm. Which would prove interesting, given the way that the Welsh have worded their case against the internal market bill.
We should talk about that in this context as well.
Well,
Yeah.
we've done quite well in Norrie in summing up, because we've got two other articles, Jimmy, we wanted to talk about. Joanna Cherry on the internal market bill and the Welsh case, and Iain Lawson on, you could say, the issues around what we've just been talking about, this possible gold standard, Section 30. So yeah, here we are in the middle of it already.
Well, Joanna Cherry's piece, I mean, she's a QC, so the law is always going to be a weapon she's willing to wield, probably much more, because Nicola Sturgeon hasn't really been a lawyer for a long time. But Joanna Cherry sees it as a weapon to wield, and she's already used it successfully.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I of course didn't realize, win or lose the Welsh case, a Scottish case would have to go through the Scottish courts before it got to the Supreme Court.
It's a different, yes, it's a different case, it's a different law, and it's a different jurisdiction. So, and I liked the headline, and I think it was that she is goading Scottish Labour members on the fact that it's a Labour Welsh devolved government that's taking the Tories to court, and the Labour Party did not turn up.
They abstained.
They abstained. They didn't even turn up in the Commons, apparently, to object to this bill being passed. So there.
And the next time you hear a Labour Party member going on about how Labour introduced devolution, remind them they were standing on the sidelines when the Tories unintroduced devolution.
Nicely put.
Because that's what they did. They're terrified that they lose. I mean, I don't know what their internal polling says, but it appears that 16% on the left are unionists, and they're terrified they lose the 16% they've got. That's the only way I can read the way they act.
I don't know, but I'm not so sure that they are, but I'm not so sure they think they're going to finish third in the Scottish election next year, mate. I don't think the polling's right. I think the Tories are neck and neck with Labour. And if they finish second, Richard Leonard might think he could manage to hang on to his job.
Well, you could be right, you could be wrong, but that was a very interesting poll this week, and I had a look at some of the detail, and there was no difference between the Conservative vote for the constituency or for the list, whereas Labour lost quite a lot on the list.
I think you guys might be right on that one, actually. I don't think there'll be an awful lot between them. And funnily enough, I think the decision on the fishing and Brexit might be quite decisive in this.
Yeah, they could lose some of their, depending on what they come up with for fishing and agriculture. That's the Tories' core vote that could quite easily, just even if the decisions are poor for their core vote, they didn't even need to switch sides, mate. They just need to stay at home.
Did you look at the map? The constituency map? I think there are 73 constituencies.
71.
Right? 71.
73.
No, I think the SNP would win 71, and the Tories would win
one.
They would win the borders.
There was the Tories
and the islands and the Northern Isles
would go to the Liberal Democrats.
Lib Dems. So that was just 2. So that would make them 73. Yeah. Oh wait a minute. No, if it's the Holyrood Parliament, though, the Northern Isles are separate. They get 2, so it must. You could be right. Anyway, let's not argue about 1 or 2. But the entire mainland, apart from the Borders Council, was SNP. And if that doesn't tell them something,
I would like to see the SNP break the Liberal Democrat hold on the islands.
Yeah, they came close last time, didn't they?
But they didn't. They put a lot of money into the by-election up there, didn't they?
I think it's worth breaking, because if one goes, I think within 10 years they'll all go. because that's feudal. That's kind of the big man on the island. Is
No,
your
well, obviously
NSP.
the MP that you've got is
Yeah.
Well, aye.
the top man.
Tavish Scott's basically the laird, isn't he? He's the laird's son.
Aye.
So that's
Aye.
why he gets voted for.
And as I say, I think if one goes, the rest will tumble. Okay, that's Joanna's piece.
Well, as I say,
Sorry.
I think the wording that the Welsh are using is very interesting, and you need to get a closer look at exactly what it all means. But from Joanna's piece, they're actually challenging the tenant, shall we say, that no parliament can bind another. They're actually, the way that they have worded their challenge is a direct slap in the face to those like Jacob Rees-Mogg, hopefully he takes the bait, who believe that the unwritten constitution can be interpreted any way as sees fit by the winner of an election.
No, you're right. I think I should read out what Joanna actually wrote, because it has significance in Scotland that it doesn't have in Wales. The answer to this question could have considerable significance for the Scottish Parliament in defending Scottish devolution, but it could also have wider significance in relation to the status of the Act of Union and the circumstances in which the British Constitution might admit of the dissolution of the Union.
Aye, it's going to be an interesting few months. Also, the fact that it'll get right up Jacob Rees-Mogg nose that he hasn't managed to limit people's access to judicial review, because this is a judicial review that they will absolutely would love not to be happening.
I'm not entirely sure I agree with her on that.
Well, look, the point
one is an international treaty signed between two sovereign nations. The other is basically an agreement between governments of one nation.
Well, perhaps more opposite to what Jimmy was saying there. She also says, this is very significant because it raises the question of whether the Westminster Parliament is really as supreme as its aficionados claim. Can any act of Parliament be overruled by a subsequent act, or are some acts of such constitutional significance that subsequent acts must be read in such a way that they don't undermine the previous act? But, you know, that is the rub of the entire Westminster system. You cannot bind a following Parliament.
As far as constitutional agreements go, in the past, when the Treaty of Union has been set aside, it's been by agreement, if you like. It's been things that nobody really objected to. I don't think there's been a point at which a majority of Scottish MPs were prepared to walk out of Westminster over something that kind of ignored the Treaty of Union, because it hasn't happened recently. And we were all unionists together at one point, remember?
Well, look, Joanna didn't just have a go at the Labour Party in Scotland. She also had a go at the Lord Advocate.
Yeah.
And basically, it's taken the Welsh. They moved before, they were very quick to raise this action against the UK government. But she says here, it is an unfortunate state of affairs that the Scottish government's chief legal advisor, the Lord Advocate, is currently embroiled in trying to frustrate the well-intentioned Keating's case, which seeks to establish whether the Scottish Parliament has the power to hold an independence referendum.
Which kind of brings us nicely on a subject Jimmy might want a word on. He's freed himself up some time recently, the Lord Advocate, has he not?
Yes, but at a hellish expense that I do hope comes out over the weekend. He settled the case of malicious prosecution against two administrators, I suppose you could say, during the Rangers debacle. But we don't have a accounting of the bill, so to speak. But between the two of them, they were suing him for about 30 mil. So if they've settled, we can safely
They've
assume
settled on 20.
a lot of money.
They've settled on 20 plus what they got before.
Right, that's a nice wee number. I do wonder if Mr. Wolfe might consider his position at that point, because that's a hell of a lot of money he's cost the Scottish taxpayer.
He seems to think he's immune.
Well, he kind of is, mate. There's not a lot that can be done to a Lord Advocate, is there?
Is he fireable?
I don't think so, mate. That's a problem. And the legal profession in Scotland are kind of a law unto themselves. I don't quite know who appointed James Wolfe. I don't quite know how you go about getting shot of him. And I don't think our politicians are that clear on that point either.
I get the feeling it's a shame that Lord McCluskey's not still around. He would have had something to say.
We were going to look into this, and I think we had a look and couldn't work it out.
It's all kept very opaque. There's linkage between the legal community in Scotland and England that is almost impossible to work out. Effectively, our legal community can't. Their preferment at some point relies upon the English legal community, which is a bit of a worry that that's not codified and we can't actually find out exactly how we get rid. Because as far as I'm concerned, James Wolfe should go. 1, malicious prosecution. 2, he made an absolute pig's lug of the entire salmon thing, didn't he?
Yeah, he seems to be less than competent, let's put it that way. Which moves us on to Iain
Lawson.
That
was quite a nice headline, by the way, on that article. Did you see that one, Jimmy?
I've not seen it, I didn't think, no. Oh, I did. I seen it last night.
A picture of Michael Gove, and there's Gove making a quote. I don't have the exact quote, basically saying, obviously in the context of the Brexit referendum, how wonderful it is to be independent. But of course, it doesn't apply to Scotland, does it?
Yeah, they don't do irony in Westminster, do they? Particularly Scottish Tories.
Well, can I work back from what I liked? The reason I liked the article was I discovered a couple of things that I didn't really think about. He's talking about strategy towards independence, and he talked about something called a conversion campaign. That seems to refer to not just getting people to vote for one election, the SNP for one election, or the soft nose, getting them to vote for yes, or getting to vote for the SNP, more importantly, for the May election. But it seems to be a case of turning people who will then be permanently for independence. And the other thing was he raised the question of what the strategy and how you employ all the professional SNP people, the people that all go on pay. They're all paid by either by the state because they're politicians, or by the or some other way. And I hadn't actually considered either of these things. So it's an interesting article in that basis.
Well, his point about the professionals is he wants more pro-indie statements out of them, really, isn't it? He wants them putting independence front and center of what they say and do. And the conversion thing.
He's asking the question why they haven't been backing independence, why they've been quite so willing.
Can you repeat that, Jimmy?
No, so I was just saying that I asked the question that Iain Lawson's asking, why the professionals, why the people that are paid for by the party are quite so quiet about independence and have been for the last 5 years. Does that just come straight from the leadership? Does it come straight from party HQ? Have they decided? I mean, Wheest for Indy, who came up with Wheest for Indy, and why has it been allowed to be quite so prevalent for the entirety of this last Scottish Parliament?
Well, just something that's just occurred to me. I wasn't sure just how important, how a big change the replacement of the NEC at the conference was. It's been so quiet from the Wheest for Indy crowd since. I suspect it's been more, had more impact than I realised.
I would actually hope next year that came up once the election's out the way. I would hope that the professionals, the people who make their living from the SNP, are trailing along in the wake of the Yes movement. As soon as any hint of a referendum is in the air, I expect the Yes movement to explode. And I think these professionals will, I hope they'll be trailing in the wake. I hope they'll come along with us. But if they don't, they can jettison themselves out the back door at any point. Scotland's no willing to wait. They've had 5 years and they've done nothing. Nicola gets a free pass on that because she's a damn fine administrator and a damn fine First Minister. They don't. They've been picking up their 50, 60 grand a year to work for the SNP and doing sweet Fanny Adams for it, as far as I'm concerned.
I think, going back to the article, I agree with them, I think, about the figureheads, shall we call them, the professional figureheads of the SNP. They do need now, I think, to start bashing on. I think the wished for indie element of this is a successful campaign by the unionists, especially the Tories, who took that line, oh, I wish she'd shut up about independence. When's she going to stop talking about independence? Which was completely contrary to what was happening, but was bought by the TV and the press.
I think it was bought by the party, mate. I think they were cowed by the fact that they didn't win an outright majority in the last election. I think they've been cowed throughout the entirety of this parliament.
Well, I think they got suckered by it.
That, and of course they screwed themselves with the 2017 election by not talking about independence. Iain Lawson points that out to them. You know, they had a campaign that people stayed at home because they were completely underwhelmed by the campaign ran by these professionals. I mean, seriously, they get paid big bucks, mate. Come on, the SNP's been spending a lot of public money.
Well, I can tell you who was behind the strategy for that election: Angus Robertson.
Mm-hmm. Aye, and he gets off with it. He gets a free pass and all because he's best pals with Nicky.
I'm not sure I agree with you about that. I think a lot of the reason that people didn't turn out was because the papers convinced them it was going to be a walkover. Well, if you remember at the time, they were talking about the kind of figures they're talking about now.
Yeah.
People were saying, no, the polls aren't right. There's another 5% on that. And I think that kept people at home. And the mistake they made was not getting the vote out.
Anyway, the figures.
Nori, that's all well, that's true. You're right about that. But again, that is kind of making excuses for the fact that they did run a campaign that said very little about independence.
Well, I agree with you on that. Yeah.
People get enthusiastic about independence. They don't get enthusiastic about another school.
See, I think people do. People want to know about schools. They want to know about the main tenet of any SNP campaign, as it has been for, I don't know, 100 years since they set the party up, 90 odd years, is independence for Scotland. That's the number one priority for the SNP. And for the last 5 years, it hasn't seemed that way. To not only to party members who have left, but to people who I would never consider joining the SNP. You'll forgive me, but I've sat in too many rooms with too many fannies over the past to ever go to a political meeting again, really, I think. But certainly not an SNP one. But there's millions out here that desperately want independence. There's probably, I mean, I don't know if Yes Alba or whatever they're bloody calling themselves, Neil Mackay's latest nonsense, but they will get hundreds of thousands of members. And these people will be out campaigning. The problem is they didn't necessarily want to come out and campaign for the SNP because they feel the SNP have let them down over the last 5 years.
I actually think that's a vocal minority. I think most people that went out last time will go out this time. They won't. I don't think they'll have to worry about boots on the ground, to put it that way.
Near the but they can't even keep marching them up the hill. They can't keep doing the grand old Duke of York nonsense. And Nicola's done that a couple of times. A couple of times she's made promises that she hasn't followed through on. And as I say, it should be to her eternal embarrassment that she allowed a Prime Minister as weak as Theresa May to slap her down in the way that she did.
Well, that's actually the problem. That the Prime Minister can slap her down. And then
she allows it.
What do you mean she allows it? The constitutional issue is reserved. She then has to go out with the Constitution to do anything about it.
She's still got a gob.
If she's not got the nuts to do that, mate, then it's time for her to go. If she's not got the balls to do what the Yes movement wants her to do, then she needs to see this election through and then go and get herself a job at the EU or the UN, whatever it is that she fancies. Because the country is no willing to wait any longer. Her caution will have cost her her legacy if she's not got the chuckies to do what needs to be done.
Which brings us to the second part of Iain Lawson's piece about, well, how did he phrase it, Stuart?
I don't know what you mean. Sorry, you'll need to.
This bit about no voters. What did he? A conversion strategy.
Well, I don't understand a conversion campaign. No, I don't. I think you covered it to some extent. I'd never heard of it, a conversion campaign. The idea, simply the idea that, well, we've already talked about it. The 500,000 people that didn't turn out to vote for in 2017.
No. The conversion campaign is apparently to turn soft no voters into yes voters.
No. It's the opposite. It's to turn. It's permanent voters. Whereas his argument in this article is that you can persuade people just to switch soft no voters. You can persuade them to vote for the SNP just for an SNP election, but they could easily be persuaded to switch back by the campaign, by the unionist campaign. But you've got a different story when it comes to a referendum.
Right, but a referendum's a referendum. It's not an election. So you persuade people, you go out and persuade people to vote yes.
I've never heard of this conversion campaign before, so it's new to me. I'm not the expert.
Well, it's what I thought I was trying to do during the 2014 referendum, which was to convert no voters into yes voters.
Aye, I think it's...
Well, there's a difference between converting them from no to yes than there is to converting them to vote for the SNP, obviously, isn't there?
Well, I mean, it's one vote.
There's a lot of people.
If you get their yes vote at that referendum, you don't have to worry about the next one.
Ah, but we've got a party election, a parliamentary election first.
I found it strange. It seemed to label something that we were trying to do anyway.
Well, I'd never heard of the term in the way I understood it. And the other one was this. Well, we've covered the professional SNPs. I did like the last thing he mentioned, which is something to do with it's time to take our brave pills.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair criticism of the professional SNP cohort. Jimmy, anything catch your eye today?
There was something, but it's completely went out of my head at the moment.
Did it involve Brexit?
I can tell you there is a bit of housekeeping that we could mention, even with the camera running, is that we're not expecting a lot of political activity next week, apart from daily repeats of Brexit isn't done yet, because the MPs have all gone home. I think the MSPs have gone home. When Jean Freeman said goodbye in today's press briefing, she didn't say there'd be one on Monday. She simply said we'll see you at the beginning of next week. The review's on Tuesday, so I suspect there won't be a briefing on Monday.
There's one more.
That's what she said, but then she also said we might have to come back because things could change.
Well,
it's being a politician and getting a three week paid holiday.
Well, I think that's only fair, Jimmy.
Do you?
Yeah.
However, I have lined up an interview with an expert on rehab and drugs and all the rest of it, which we just had a good argument about yesterday. So we'll have a special on that ready for next week.
I take it that's Phil.
Yes, he knows what he's talking about.
Well, we'll have a little chat about when we're going to finish. And I was wondering if you would be interested in having a wee awards show
Oh,
for the best Tory politician of the year, the worst SNP politician of the year,
Ooh.
the most effective Scottish politician.
if you can get the best Tory to stand in the middle of Princess Street, I'll hit him at about 70 mile an hour and see how far this taxi can shove him. Mate.
Well, I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on the best Scottish Labour MP and the worst Scottish Labour MP. I would think we need to have an award for that. And we can argue about who's going to get it.
Let's have a wee think about that and reconvene on Sunday with our ideas.
Well, I think, well, we make Sunday the awards show then.
I think we could, aye.
Because I don't think there's any politics on Sunday, is there?
It'll be Brexit, because it won't be decided.
Because I think Mar's finished, and
Yeah,
if
I think Mar probably is finished.
If there's no London politics, there's no Scottish politics.
No, they'll all have gone home no, they're not going away on their holidays, are they?
Well,
I think they could frighten you, Stuart, and come up with a deal over the weekend or something that is vaguely reminiscent of something that might have been considered a deal about 18 months ago, long before they actually started trying to find a deal.
I think they're going to get a deal. There you are.
It'll be shite. It'll be brown. It'll be smelly. And it might have a couple of wee googly eyes on it, but it will be what they call a deal.
It'll be a U-turn.
I think Boris has already given up on the level playing field, and I think they'll fudge the fish.
Well, the fish is intended to be the window dressing. That's what people are meant to notice. So we got a deal on fish.
And Boris would be stupid enough to dress his windows with fish.
Yeah, aye. Even I've got a couple of friends who are fishmongers, and even they wouldn't use fish as window dressing.
Smelly stuff, dead fish.
Is this the fishmonger family of BLiS?
One of them, mate, yeah.
Okay, guys, call it a day at that. Thanks for getting here, Jimmy. Thanks for being here, Stuart. Thanks for listening and watching, folks, and we'll catch you all on Sunday for our awards show.
Cheery.
Cheers for now. Bye.